Michael Penix and the Atlanta Falcons control their destiny after the Buccaneers blow it on Sunday Night Football. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today, as I am every Monday, by Locked On NFL expert Gino Camilleri. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the crazy AFC Wild Card race. We're going to talk about the Commanders and the Ravens pushing for a division title, but we're going to start with the crazy NFC South, where the Atlanta Falcons take back their destiny, led by Michael Penix, and the Buccaneers do a little bit of a favor for the Falcons as well. Before we do, though, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. But again, Gino, Baker Mayfield, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they blow it against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football.
Michael Penix, he has a chance to potentially win the division right now. What is going on in the NFC South?
I mean, it is going to be pretty crazy, and the reality is this loss by Tampa Bay is excruciating, and my guy James Yarko from Locked On Bucks broke down the big L.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose a wild game on Sunday night. I am James Yarko, host of Locked On Bucks, talking about the Buccaneers' 26-24 loss to the Dallas Cowboys. Cooper Rush was dominant in the first half, throwing for 220 yards and a touchdown against Todd Bowles' defense. But that defense tightened up in the second half, allowing only 3 points, but the offense couldn't get things going. An incredible play at the end of the game where Rachaad White was stripped of the ball, ended the Bucs' comeback bid, and they now drop to second place in the NFC South. They need a win by the Washington Commanders next week against the Atlanta Falcons, and they still have to beat the Panthers and the Saints to finish the season in order to win the NFC South. For more on this and all things Buccaneers, check out the Locked On Bucks podcast 5 days a week, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Obviously, the biggest impact that this has on the NFL and going forward is that the Buccaneers have now pulled back, and they are in second place. And as James explained, the Buccaneers are in second place to the Atlanta Falcons now because they got swept by the Atlanta Falcons. So that puts them in a terrible position if they happen to have the same records. But, man, ultimately, what a game in Dallas. The Dallas defense made huge plays, got turnovers. Jordan Lewis on the rip-away pick on the deep ball. Then, obviously, the play at the end by Deron Bland to strip the ball away from Rachaad White. There were huge hits in this game as well. A lot of great football, but at the end of the day, again, the biggest hit coming to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers playoff chances by losing to a team that, honestly, they should not have lost to.
Good on the Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy for getting those guys ready to go each and every week. But what is Todd Bowles sending a message in that locker room each and every week that isn't, we have to win every game from here on out? And to lose to this Dallas team, not one of the better Dallas teams you'll ever see. This isn't your grandfather's Dallas team. This isn't even the 2023 Dallas team that won the division. They still have a chance in Tampa Bay to win the NFC South. But you have to control what you can control. Great teams do that. Good teams don't. I think we saw that today. And now Atlanta, Michael Penix, a rejuvenated Atlanta Falcons team, puts up some points against the Giants. That's a storyline you're going to want to watch out for here over the next couple weeks.
100%. And someone who is watching out for that story is my guy Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons.
Michael Penix shines in his debut in a big win for the Atlanta Falcons. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. Do the Falcons have their quarterback of the future? Yeah, I think they do. Michael Penix led the Falcons to an impressive 34-7 win in his first NFL start of the season against the New York Giants. Penix finished 18 of 27 for 202 yards and an interception, but looked poised and precise all game, and his lone interception was really on a Kyle Pitts bobble pass. Giants quarterback Drew Lock looked anything but poised with 3 turnovers, including a pair of pick sixes and a fumble. Clearly, the Falcons defense was inspired by the leadership of Michael Penix Jr. For more inspirational and uplifting coverage of the new era of Falcons football, follow Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, I got to say, if you follow Aaron Freeman's clips from Locked On Falcons that we've used on the show here in the last few weeks, there's no higher comedy than what Aaron Freeman has given us at the end of those videos. But look, good vibes all around in Atlanta. One of my bold predictions before the year was that Michael Penix would be the best quarterback on the Falcons. I think that might be true, and I think the Falcons took a month too long to do it. But at the end of the day, they hold the key to their destiny and their future now because of the loss by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Michael Penix, they're not going to play the Giants every week, but the version of the Falcons that we've seen the last month, I don't know if they beat the New York Giants like this. So I think this is good news for the Falcons, and it may have been late, but they made the change to Penix right at the right time because now they can go into the playoffs, and if that defense keeps playing the way that it's been playing lately, they might have a chance to pull an upset.
I said it here a couple weeks ago that they should put Michael Penix in the
Yes, you did.
game, and that was, I mean, halfway through November we're talking, man. And what if they did that? Would they have a chance to secure that 3 seed a little bit earlier? Now it's in the hands of Michael Penix to keep pace with the Rams in the West. That is not any cakewalk at all. And you're talking about potentially flipping it from playing a Minnesota and or Detroit team. We'll see what happens in Week 18, who wins the NFC North, and then who ultimately is that the first wild card spot. Do you want to play Minnesota if you're Atlanta in the first round? I definitely would not. Would you want to play Detroit? Definitely not. So if you want any chance to potentially play Green Bay and or Washington in that first round, you might have to potentially get that 3 seed in the NFC, which in the West, they're not any world beaters either. So Michael Penix, man, he might be in for yet another playoff run after his year at Washington last year.
Well, here's the thing. They're going to have to prove it because, as we heard, they play the Commanders next week. They're at the Washington Commanders on Sunday Night Football. What a great football game that is going to be with the 2 rookie quarterbacks. But then they play the Panthers in the final week of the season, and they may be at home. But the Carolina Panthers have been playing great football lately. That's not going to be an easy one. So Michael Penix, if he's going to get the playoff matchups he wants, if he's going to lead this team in, they are certainly going to have to prove it because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to have every opportunity to get back in the race because of that tough schedule. It's absolutely no guarantee that the Falcons win both of those games. And you look at it, for the Bucs, it's not easy because they play the Panthers. They're at home for that game, though, the Bucs are. And then they play the Saints, 2 division games. That's not easy, but it's certainly not as hard as having the Commanders on the schedule. So Tampa Bay down right now, but an easier schedule. Michael Penix is going to have to earn this one. I think that he will be able to do that. I'm very excited to watch that game next week, no matter what. If you had to kind of choose who you think is going to win this game or win this division down the stretch quickly, 5 seconds. Who you got? Tampa Bay or Atlanta?
I was against Michael Penix when I was an Oregon fan. I'm not going to root against him now when I have no dog in the fight. Go Michael Penix, go Atlanta Falcons.
All right. Well, we talked about some playoff seeding and who they might play. You mentioned the Commanders in the wild card. Well, Gino, bad news for your Eagles. Commanders may be able to come back here and take the division. It's Locked On NFL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. All right, folks, if you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy, whether it be football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports. Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter, and now you can win up to 1,000 times. That's right, 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30 million in rewards during Pickmas And they're offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out and get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. This week, you could look at Jared Goff, more than 230 passing yards, maybe Saquon Barkley to have more than 1 touchdown. It's quick, it's simple, and it's so much fun to challenge myself and my friends. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Gino, let's continue today's Week 16 recap edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. In my opinion, the biggest story of the day is the Michael Penix insertion in the lineup, leading to a huge victory over the Giants, and then the Buccaneers blow it to help out the Falcons even more. But there's even more drama in the NFL playoff standings as the Philadelphia Eagles lose to the Washington Commanders after having a big lead. Jalen Hurts goes out with an injury, and the Commanders feeling a little bit of hope. And my guy David Harrison explained that from Locked On Commanders.
You can call the Washington Commanders a lot of things, but don't call them eliminated from NFC East division competition. This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast. And following a 36-33 win, the Washington Commanders prevented the Philadelphia Eagles from clinching the NFC East division and also moved 1 game closer to clinching their own playoff spot. Now, the truth of the matter is the possibility of the Washington Commanders catching the Philadelphia Eagles to secure an NFC East division championship, not very likely, but they now have a 92% chance of making the NFL playoffs this season, and they have won 10 games in the regular season for the first time since 2012, and they did it despite giving up 123 yards rushing to Saquon Barkley in the first half and having 5 turnovers on offense. It was a tough win, an ugly win, but the exact kind of win that Dan Quinn wants to see his team be able to gut out in the regular season.
I mean, he's right about that. They got down big, and although, Jalen Hurts did go out with a concussion, it's still a very big win for the Commanders, a young team that's a year ahead of schedule anyways. So right now, if you look at it, the Commanders are 2 games off of the Philadelphia Eagles. They've split the season series with them, though, so that helps. The Commanders play the Falcons, and then they play at the Cowboys, and the Cowboys obviously more formidable than maybe some people were giving them credit for. And then you look at the Eagles, they play the Cowboys, and then they play the Giants, both of those being home games. I think the Eagles have an easier route to finishing off this season and winning the division. The Commanders would need them to lose both games, and the Commanders would have to win both of their games as well to even have a chance. Do you think that the Eagles are now susceptible to that happening, Gino, as somebody who's obviously, boots on the ground covering the Eagles all the time? Or do you think that, the Commanders are just a good football team, and without Jalen Hurts, things were a little weird for the Eagles today?
I think it's the latter form of that conversation that you just presented. And I think the story just comes down to the quarterback position, and injuries happen. I get it. Next man up, you put up 21 points in that first quarter. You did a good enough job. Your defense allowed Jaden Daniels to really show the playmaker that he is, man. That's a team that is in great hands with Dan Quinn, a star at the quarterback position, and they haven't won 10 games since 2012, and we remember what happened that year.
Yes.
That's the RG3 year, man. We all know what happened back then. Feels like Jaden Daniels rejuvenated that franchise today, and mathematically, it's going to be tough for the Eagles to slip up, but they did it last year when the Cowboys almost had a next to zero chance to win it towards the end of the year, and they did. They got to figure out a way to win one of these games down the stretch, but Washington most likely is going to see the Eagles in a first-round matchup on the road.
Yeah.
Are they thinking they can get the best of this series and win that grudge match after today? How are you thinking anything else other than we can make a run with this guy at quarterback?
100%. I think more than, why it's mathematically possible for the Commanders to catch. I'm with you. I think the Eagles win one of those 2 matchups down the stretch, and they seal it out, especially playing the Giants. They'll figure out a way to win that game. Even if Kenny Pickett had to play quarterback, I think the Eagles would find a way to win that game because Kenny Pickett really didn't play all that bad. I mean, in the game, he wasn't he wasn't terrible by any means. You know what I mean? Washington just made a lot of great plays. Got the drop by Devontae Smith late. But I think, like you're saying, whether the Commanders come back or not to win the division, I think this proves to them we can beat the Eagles if we see them again. They're beatable, whether Jalen Hurts played most of the game or not. And I think for a young team that's fresh together, I think that sort of confidence is really, really important. But looking at another situation in the AFC this time, though, a game that got played on Saturday, the Ravens and the Steelers. The Ravens win in pretty convincing fashion. Quite frankly, that game never really felt like it was in doubt, 34-17. And absolutely huge for the Ravens. Now the Steelers and the Ravens both sit at 10-5. Right now, the Steelers do have the tiebreaker because they have a better conference record in the AFC. They're 7-3 in the conference, while Baltimore is 6-4. But the teams we saw play on Saturday play again, just in different matchups on Christmas Day, with the Steelers playing the Chiefs and then the Ravens playing the Texans. The Texans lose that game against the Chiefs. They also lose Tank Dell for the rest of the season. I think I can go out on a limb and say that without a confirmation right now. It looked like a brutal knee injury. And the Texans just have not been a very consistent, efficient team throughout the year. So I think it's entirely possible that the Ravens win against the Texans and the Steelers lose against the Chiefs. And then the conference records would be tied for the Steelers and the Ravens at 7-4. And then it would go to strength of schedule and strength of victory. Two areas where the Ravens have significant advantages right now on the Baltimore Ravens or on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that whereas Washington catching the Eagles is pretty unlikely, I think we can look at it now and say that there is a great chance that the Baltimore Ravens can catch the Steelers and ultimately win that division.
I think also in that conversation where Washington, you might say that they closed the gap a little bit to Philadelphia. I think Baltimore only extended their gap over Pittsburgh here. I really think they are showing that they are the alpha team in the AFC North right now. And Pittsburgh, they put together a pretty good season, and you're still going to have a chance to win a playoff game potentially.
Yeah.
But without George Pickett, it's crazy that one guy can change their entire offensive output. But without him, they really can't do anything. And as good as the defense is, teams like Baltimore, teams like Buffalo, those teams could score points no matter what. Baltimore is legit, man. They are legit. Derrick Henry is running well. Lamar Jackson finally gets that big win, and it wasn't really too much of a headache, this one. They didn't let Pittsburgh back in it like they do at play with their food sometimes.
They do.
Baltimore is figuring it out here down the stretch, how they're going to have to win games in the playoffs. And if they win on Christmas, that's against two teams in the last 5 days or so that you could say, hey, when we have to go against the big boys, we know we can close these games out. We just needed to get the confidence and do it. Well, you're already half the way there.
Well, I think what we're looking at right here is if things go the way they look like they're going to go, which, hey, it's the NFL, they rarely do, but we're looking at a Steelers-Houston Texans first-round matchup. If the Steelers do drop in that race, could be interesting. The Chargers or the Steelers, maybe who gets that 5 seed, that first wild card spot. Maybe it'd be the Steelers. I'm thinking that could make for some interesting playoff matchups because Houston is definitely gettable as well. So be very interesting to see how that works. But I think both of us in our agreement, much better chance that the Ravens catch the Steelers for the AFC North than the Commanders catching the Eagles. But both mathematically possible. So we will watch that unfold the last 2 weeks of the season. But speaking of watching it unfold, the AFC Wild Card final spot just got nuts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, the NFL playoffs are almost here. We're talking about all these crazy playoff races coming down to the last few weeks. It's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and then you're ready to go for the playoffs because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score. I love the live drive betting. You can bet are they going to punt, field goal, touchdown, turnover, all that different stuff. It's so much fun on FanDuel. Of course, they have over-unders and spreads and money lines and all of that as well. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Gino, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL, breaking down Week 16. We got one more game left on Monday Night Football, of course. It's the Green Bay Packers and the New Orleans Saints, but most of the playoff impactful games have been played at this point, and I don't think any game on the schedule this week had as big of an overall impact as the Denver Broncos losing to the Los Angeles Chargers on Thursday Night Football, because what that opened, it opened the opportunity for 3 teams in the AFC to make their push for the playoffs: the Indianapolis Colts, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Miami Dolphins. And wouldn't you know it, Gino, all 3 of those teams found a way to win on Sunday, including, like I said, the Indianapolis Colts, whose stars on offense ran the ball down the Titans' throat.
But they found out very quickly that was going to be the recipe for them to win. So Anthony, in a very small sample size, his passing day actually looked pretty good, nearly 100 passer rating. But it was as a runner where he did some really nice things. Again, nearly 8 yards per carry, had the touchdown, like I said, should have been 2 touchdowns, had a 29-yard run. The first time all year, so you just had to say it. Hold on. Anyways, yeah. So no, this was probably the exact way the Colts would like to win just about every game. Now you're never going to go over 300 yards rushing all the time, but for Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson to lead the way is probably exactly how they would envision it.
Hilarious. My guy Jake Arthur from Locked On Colts covering the game at the stadium in the press box. And obviously you don't have control over everything in there. So shout out to Jake fighting through the press box phone going off there. But it's just too important to me, the Colts situation, because the Bengals are a sexier pick and the Dolphins have their star players. But the Colts are actually the team who have the best chance to steal that final wild card spot away from the Denver Broncos. Their last 2 games are against the Giants and then against the Jaguars. They have tiebreakers in certain key areas like conference record against the Bengals. The Bengals have a terrible conference record. The Dolphins' conference record isn't that great either. So it's really, if you're looking for a team to unseat the Denver Broncos, it's the Indianapolis Colts, although they just lost to the Broncos, which is interesting. But they have the easiest schedule, and they have the ability in the trenches. In this game, Gino, the Titans allowed 335 rushing yards, the most in the history of the Tennessee Titans since they moved to Nashville. This is the best rushing day that an opponent has had. The Colts are physical. They have that run game, and Anthony Richardson was not great in this game. They can say 100 passer rating all they want. He was 7 for 11, 100 yards. They just ran the ball at will. But at the end of the day, again, look at the schedule remaining. The Giants, the Jaguars, the Colts can absolutely run the ball down their throats as well. I think you look at this, I would love to see the Bengals in because I think they're an overall better football team than the Indianapolis Colts. They're at least more exciting. But it's really the Colts who, if the Broncos mess up one more time, which they play the Bengals this week, if they mess up one more time, I think the Colts are the team that gets the final wild card spot.
Turned on the news today here in Denver. Said the Broncos haven't wrapped up a playoff spot yet. And the reporter seemed very, very worried about the exact scenario you just laid out there, Ty. And it's not just playing Cincinnati. You know who they finished the season with, correct? Potentially City, Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. I mean, more than likely they'll lock up the 1 seed at that point.
You would hope.
But still, it's a divisional game. It's Kansas City, a team who always has your number. The way they beat you the last time was out of a voodoo magic shop.
Yep.
It's not going to be easy for the Broncos, especially with Bo Nix. It's a roller coaster every single week with him. But at the same time, Indianapolis, that's a roller coaster at quarterback that you got to worry about. Miami has been up and down. If there's one that, if they had the tiebreakers, would have a great chance to make things really happen in the playoffs, that Cincinnati team, man. Like Joe Burrow, if there was like an MVP for a non-playoff team, it would probably have to be him because what he is doing at the position this season. But Indianapolis realizing, hey, maybe Anthony Richardson, even though he is not as great of a passer as we envisioned, well, it doesn't matter if we can run the ball for 300-plus yards against anybody. That's a way you are going to win down the stretch. That is winning football. Jonathan Taylor is an absolute freak. We forget about how good he is. And it's like, oh, yeah, we're playing Tennessee. Let's just go put on the Daytona 500 in terms of yardage against them. And that's exactly what they did.
And here's the thing. The Colts are 6-5 in the conference. The Dolphins are 5-5 in the conference. And the Bengals are 4-6 in the conference. So the Bengals are really on the outside looking in, despite most people thinking like, oh, the Bengals have a chance to get back. Man, they're going to need a lot of help to be able to do that because the Dolphins and the Colts are in a better spot, even if we all would rather see the Bengals, because of what you're saying. Joe Burrow's just been so fantastic so far this year. Do you think any of these teams actually catch the Broncos?
I think Denver has a better team than we're leading on by this discussion. I think they're still in a tier ahead of those three teams. I think Indianapolis, I still don't trust them. I've seen Denver stay in enough big games, compete against enough big opponents, and they would have to lose these last two. Down the stretch, Sean Payton, I'll take my odds with him. I know Shane Steichen is a really good coach. I know he's gotten a good offensive performance out of the Colts the last couple weeks here. But that's a tough road forward, man. Down the stretch here in the AFC where those teams just all tend to beat each other up, man. Like, it's just the circle of everybody beating each other out there. And right now in this race, I don't think the Broncos slip up. But if they do, shout out to Indianapolis for getting right down the stretch after doing that whole Flacco experiment, man. I mean, did Richardson revitalize his career? I don't know about that, but it's worth a discussion that somebody else might take a chance on him down the road. But here we are still in 2024, and there's a whole bunch to be solved. It's crazy that adding this 7th playoff spot genuinely would have this big of an impact and still this much to be decided when just a couple weeks ago we were saying that there really is no middle ground, and now we're like, the NFC, that wild card race is wide open. The last spot in the AFC is wide open, and we only have 2 games left here. I can't believe this NFL season's almost done, Ty.
I know, man. It's going so fast. I will say that I'm with you. I don't think the Denver Broncos collapse completely. I think they're a better football team overall than the Cincinnati Bengals. That doesn't mean that they'll beat the Bengals, because if the Bengals offense gets hot, I mean, I was shocked by how bad the Broncos defense played against the Los Angeles Chargers offense, which certainly isn't something fantastic with a ton of talent all over the place. So the Bengals, if they could treat the Broncos defense like that, then Denver will probably lose that game. But between a shaky, inconsistent Bengals team with a bad defense, and then, like you said, the Chiefs, who are probably going to be resting players at that time, because if they win next week, Buffalo can't catch them. So there's a good chance that I think Denver finds a way to win one of them and get in the playoffs. But we're all going to watch it unfold, and I can't wait. We're going to be here to break it all down. That's going to do it for us today. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. You can tell it's getting to the end of the season, folks. But also check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barber shop. That's going to do it for me, your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, and my co-host, Gino Camilleri. And as we tell you every single episode, stay safe out there.